Good morning and welcome to Experience Analytics Day 4. My name's Andy Gould.
And I'm Natalie Williams.
Thank you for turning up again today. And for those that are visiting us for the first time, where have you been?
That's right, Andy. Where have you been? Don't worry, you might have missed some great content so far, but we are going to make that content available to be able to stream online on our website at the end of the week.
Today, we're going to be hearing from Sainsbury's and from Snowflake about the transformation journey they've been on together in combining the business and technology processes to drive greater insight across the organisation.
It's a really big trend in the market. If I look about 3 or 4 years ago, the transformation programs that we were looking at didn't necessarily have data and analytics at their core. However, in surveying many of our clients last year, over 60% of you are now looking to embed data and analytics and AI into your major transformation programs. And that's true in insurance as well, my industry. If I look at the underwriting or claims transformations that we're driving, data and analytics and AI are really at the core of these transformations.
And that's no different in the world of consumer. So without further ado, let's hear from Graham from Sainsbury's, Luca from Snowflake and Peter from Deloitte.
Well, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Natalie, for that great introduction. And I'm really excited to be able to introduce a case study that's going to come from our friends at Sainsbury's and Snowflake, who are dealing with a problem that all of us grapple with on a regular basis in analytics, and that is how we broaden and deepen the use of insight within the business. And I think retail's a really good place to demonstrate that. I've been working in retail analytics for the last decade, and it's a fantastic place for analytics professionals for 3 reasons. The first one, it's very creative. If you think about the consumer, you can never know their mind, know exactly what they're thinking. Even if you ask them, they're not going to be able to tell you. So you have to find ways to observe the behaviour, to understand from lots of different data sets what they're actually after and what they're going to buy. That creativity runs throughout, and it makes for a really interesting place to be looking for insights and developing data sets. Secondly, it's a very dynamic environment. So retailers operate on a tempo which I don't see in many other industries. It's very common on a Monday morning to be pouring through the data, trying to analyse what happened that weekend. Why didn't we trade as well as we thought? What could we improve for next week? And then spend Tuesday and Wednesday refining that to make sure that any decisions you take go into action in the stores on a Thursday and Friday, ready for peak trading of the next weekend, and repeat. And that typically doesn't happen in most other sectors where you might be looking at making decisions that would have an impact in, say, a month's time or even a quarter's time. So you get really instant feedback on the type of data that you're providing and the type of insights that you're using, and also an opportunity to test and learn very quickly. So it's creative, it's dynamic, it's also an extremely competitive environment, which means that analytics has a real impact and is hugely valued. If you think about the UK alone, there's over 200,000 registered retailers. Now, okay, there's a lot of small retailers within that. But if we looked at even the biggest retailers where, let's say, they have over £1 billion worth of revenue each year, and that 1 billion bar is pretty high, by the way, that will exclude a lot of the high street retailers that you'll be thinking of, there would still be many tens of retailers competing. So margins are thin, they have to be efficient, and they're looking for that edge that they can get. So data and data analytics is really important. Thirdly, or fourthly, I would say for this audience today, it's also a really good example because we're all shoppers. We're all consumers. We have direct experience of retail, so we can relate to what we're going to hear today, and we can understand from a consumer perspective some of the challenges that these businesses are facing. And let's talk a little bit about some of those challenges. If we went back 20 or 30 years, life would have been very simple, or at least it would have seemed so from this perspective. Maybe we had a single channel to get to our customers, high street stores perhaps. Of course, these days there are e-commerce stores, and that growth in e-commerce has been fantastic. In 2008, maybe 5% of all retail was happening online. Last year, that had risen to around about 20%. And with the impact of COVID, certain categories like clothing and household merchandise have risen as high as 50% coming through those channels. And if you're a retailer that used to have to operate a single channel, now operating that second channel is almost doubling the complexity within your business. But of course, again, think back to your experience as a consumer. It's not even that simple. You can buy a product from a brand in their store in the high street. You can buy it from their e-commerce website. You can probably also buy it in their concessions in a department store or an online aggregator. And you may also be able to see it traded through the likes of eBay and Amazon by that same retailer. And these days, maybe even Instagram. So those levels and those challenges of complexity are only growing as all of these different channels come in, and retailers have to think about how do they bring that data together, and more importantly, how do they team with these different partners running these different channels, and how do they share that data effectively with them. Let's look at one simple example going in the other direction, up the supply chain. It's now increasingly common for the big retailers to allow their suppliers to have direct visibility into their supply systems. So the supplier can see for themselves when is going to be the right time to deliver a new product. Now that makes the whole supply chain more efficient across the retailer and the supplier, but also it lifts the burden off the retailer to trying to provide that insight and do that data analysis. So it's a win-win, but it does require that ability again to share that information. Let's look at a different angle. So we've talked about complexity. We've also talked about the competitive environment and how slim margins are and how sophisticated retailers therefore need to be in their decision making. And they have traditionally been very good at using analytics to make these decisions, be that in particular silos. So let's think about marketing, for example. They were leaders in thinking about how you understand the customer, how you target those customers with the right promotions, the right offers at the right time. But that's still looking within a single domain. And so you're looking at a locally optimal solution for the business, rather than necessarily a globally optimal solution. And let me explain a little bit what I mean by that difference. Again, let's pick an example that involves the supply chain. If you think about a grocery retailer, if you're the store manager, you're incentivized on making sure that the products are always on the shelf. There's no gaps. Because if there's a gap, potentially you've missed a sale. Now that, unfortunately, incurs a huge amount of cost back in the supply chain to make sure that everything is 100% available all the time. Now, how do you make that trade-off? If you ask the store managers, they're going to optimize for availability, and that'll be great for them, locally optimal solution for the store. Similarly, if you ask the supply chain, they may choose a different level, which is going to be more efficient from that perspective. Again, locally optimal for there. What retailers are now doing is starting to look across these. Now they've gone after the locally optimal solutions, combine those data sets, combine those teams, and look for the globally optimal solution, which is a balance of something in between. Maybe we can accept a few missed sales if it massively reduces our supply costs. So that's the next level of sophistication that we're seeing retailers move to. And it might sound simple to the outsider to say, well, easy, we'll just combine those data sets. But I think you'll all appreciate from your own organizations just how complex and difficult that can be. So what underpins, certainly from my perspective, what underpins solving a lot of these problems for retailers is that ability to share data widely and to share it rapidly. That requires the three things. Certainly it requires the technology platforms designed to enable to share data, not just within your business and across functions, but actually with other partners as well. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that later today. But of course, making the data available isn't really the only solution. We need to make sure that the core data capabilities of data governance, data definitions, data quality, all of the ownership, all of those things that we've all struggled with for years are still front and center. Because otherwise we're sharing data with people who are not going to be able to understand it and use it. And that really brings me on to the third point, that this type of collaboration is by definition a team sport. There is no way we're going to be able to rely on a single team to bring all that data together, to define all that data, to even to analyze all of that data. There's going to be multiple parties contributing both to the data and to the analysis in that, and we need to find ways to work together to do that. So that's why I'm so excited to present this case study to you, which we'll hear about from Sainsbury's and Snowflake, because I think Sainsbury's are among the leading in retailers thinking about these types of problems. We're going to hear a little bit from Snowflake about the technology that underpins that, and then we'll hear from Sainsbury's about how they're changing the business to be able to share that data more widely and make full use of it. We're going to talk about retail today, but I'm sure you'll be able to draw the parallels with your own business. So with that, I'll hand across to Luca. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. It's great being here. Before we hand it over to Graham from Sainsbury's to hear directly from him about his own experience, the first part of today's session will serve as an introduction to the Snowflake Cloud Data Platform. We'll start by having a look at some of the unique characteristics that make Snowflake a true data platform built for the cloud. And then we'll see how some of our customers are taking advantage of different elements of this platform to solve some of the data challenges within their own organizations. Before we dive into Snowflake, let's have a look at the current technological landscape. The importance of data as an asset to the modern enterprise is, in my opinion, not even a topic of discussion anymore. Data strategies are a top priority for most organizations, and the market is telling us that the fastest growing and most successful companies of our time are the ones that have put a lot of thought into how to get value out of their data assets. While the concept of data as an asset may not be new, up until now it has been really difficult to make it a reality. However, recently the data space has been changing very rapidly, and so has the way that we can work with data to turn it into an actionable asset for the business. The first of these challenges is the rise of the cloud. Unlike traditional platforms that are built with the scarcity of resources in mind, the cloud offers unlimited capacity both for how we store and process that data. This gives us the opportunity to run an unprecedented amount of workloads at high performance in a fully centralized platform. Second is the explosion of data. Data, as we know, has and will continue to grow in both size and variety. And with the right technology stack in place, we can use this data to generate new insights to help us run our businesses. And finally, the last change is the diversification of analytics. Arguably, everyone today can be an analyst. As a result, when, where, and how we do analytics has completely been transformed and is being pushed to every corner of the modern enterprise. As the appetite for data continues to grow, analytics will become a central part of how every person and business process works, and therefore, the way we architect the systems that deliver that data needs to change. When companies take advantage of all their data, they can drive significant impact to how they operate and compete in the market. First, when one is able to tap into all of the data, it becomes far easier to make better, quicker business decisions. Centralizing data into a single platform reduces the number of hops that data needs to go through before it becomes actionable. By reducing or altogether eliminating the wait time for data, we get all users all the data they need when they need it. As a result, they can more readily spot new business opportunities and adjust their strategies before issues arise. Second, the ease of use and flexibility that comes with working with data in a new way allows us to reduce the overall cost of how we scale data management and analytics. By creating a single place for all types of data, we're able to deliver performance while planning for scale, without adding the excessive cost and maintenance overheads that usually come with traditional architectures. Third, when we're able to access all that data and eliminate excessive costs, we can focus on delivering a great customer experience. Whether it's improving how we interact with the customers, building better quality products, or making data accessible to both internal and external customers, we can dramatically improve the overall customer experience by leveraging our data assets. Over time, many technologies have attempted to help customers to fully leverage their data. However, all have come short and failed to deliver all the capabilities required at the same time. In the beginning, as you can see from this chart, traditional enterprise data warehouses did an adequate job at delivering performance on well-defined, structured data. At the same time, they were relatively easy to use, which made them easy to adopt. The problems began to arise as the volume of data and the desire for analytics started growing, making it hard for these resource-constrained platforms to efficiently store all that data and to support a multitude of concurrent workloads. Big data solutions, such as Hadoop and data lakes, address the issue of storing data in high volumes and in different formats, but brought along many issues around speed and concurrency, and they also proved very onerous to manage. For a lot of my customers, it's really hard to find the right resources that have the skills and the training to manage such complex architectures. Then you have the first generation of cloud data warehouses that came along and helped to some degree, offering elasticity and better cost effectiveness than their on-premises alternatives. But because they're all effectively cloud-based versions of their on-premises predecessors, they still are limited in their ability to handle all data for all users. The journey has seen incremental steps along the way, but so far, no other technology has fully delivered to meet the ease of use, scale, and performance needed to support today's workloads. What we believe we have achieved at Snowflake with the Snowflake Cloud Data Platform is the first solution that brings the best of on-premises enterprise data warehouses, the cloud, and big data into a single platform that delivers the scale, performance, and concurrency all its predecessors failed to. To further understand the current landscape, I'm going to tap into my own experience managing and helping a lot of Snowflake customers and prospects onboard Snowflake as a solution and having a look into their own architectures. So let's take a look at some of the common elements that we find when looking at our customers' legacy systems before they onboard Snowflake. While each organization has its own complexities, hopefully you will recognize some of the themes that we're trying to summarize in this diagram. Most organizations we talk to are limited in their ability to capitalize on data because they are supported by an architecture that is too costly and too complicated, and that relies on a complex web of technology stitched together to deliver data from its raw source to its intended destination. With that comes a proliferation of tools and technologies that are utilized to address the integration, transformation, aggregation, and delivery steps of the data flow, essentially the end-to-end piece. Governance and security issues, as well as siloed data, are pretty much guaranteed with this approach, as multiple copies of data eventually have to be made to meet the varying needs of different parts of the business. In the end, whoever owns these architectures tends to spend more time managing the infrastructure than they do actually working with data. What we're trying to do with Snowflake is to help customers streamline those architectures and centralize many different workloads so that they can run within one single platform. The first and maybe most common types of workloads are, of course, the traditional data warehousing workloads, but delivered now in the cloud as a service with a near zero management platform that scales with the organization and helps reduce the cost of ownership by automating many administration and performance tuning tasks. But then we're also seeing companies use us as a lake, just because of how cheap it is, and easy as well, to store large, diverse amounts of data into Snowflake. We're also seeing customers adopt us to augment an existing data lake strategy when they have one already in place. While these are certainly two of our key workloads, Snowflake is being used by our customers in many different ways. One example is to improve data engineering, leveraging Snowflake's performance and isolated workloads to streamline data ingestion and integration. For building data-intensive applications that require a strong analytical set of capabilities at their core. To serve data science communities, data science teams that need help getting access to more and more data more quickly, and to drive performance for the complex workloads that are just natural to that space. And then finally, last but not least, for secure data sharing, as a means to streamline how our customers work with their own partners and customers, or as a way to monetize those data assets, either internally or externally. What I personally find really beautiful about the platform is that all of these different workloads are not handled by different products or even different components of the platform that one would have to procure, manage, and own separately, but they're simply different ways to use the same exact service. That service is available across all the main public clouds, supporting companies within their own cloud provider of choice, as well as supporting multi-region and multi-cloud deployments to serve the growing number of companies that adopt a multi-cloud strategy. The fact that all of these things can be achieved within one unique platform is strictly tied to our unique scalable architecture, designed from the ground up to fully leverage the cloud to provide unprecedented scalability and flexibility. We're not going to dive any deeper than this into architectural conversations today. It's beyond the scope of this conversation. But the Snowflake team is always happy and available for any technical deep dives that your teams may want to have. And I'd also be personally happy to answer any questions you may have in the Q&A today. So just as a recap, the Snowflake, acting as the cornerstone to your data architecture, offers the simplicity of a single platform that can truly act as a single source of truth to support many different workloads and many different use cases as well. Having a cloud data platform with a unique architecture means that your organization can rely on basically unlimited performance and scale like never before, while ensuring that all of your data is both secure and shareable to data consumers within and outside of your organizations. All this while drastically reducing the time, resources, and manpower that are typically involved in the complex maintenance tasks, allowing you to simply focus on loading and analyzing your data. In terms of extensibility and compatibility, the fact that we're a fully standard SQL compatible solution, which makes us great for that use case that I talked about earlier on lifting and shifting and moving into the cloud those traditional data warehousing workloads, also makes it really easy for a wide variety of technology partners to integrate their technology with ours. We partner with many of the industry leaders in BI and analytics, data integration, data science, and more. So there's a really big chance that most of the key components of your data ecosystem can integrate natively with Snowflake, helping you leverage your existing investments. Snowflake has been chosen by more than 4,000 customers of different sizes, pretty much every industry that you can think of to handle some and, in many cases, all of the data-related workloads I described earlier. Across these active customers, we are helping deliver meaningful improvements in one or more of these areas, delivering tangible business value by helping them reduce cost and providing an elastic architecture that can support the needs of growing businesses. To bring some real-life examples, I want to talk about how some of our customers have transformed the way they handle data by adopting Snowflake. The first one of these customers is McKesson. To give you a sense of their global scale and reach, they're number 7 on the Fortune list with $214 billion in annual revenue. And they are responsible for 1/3 of all prescription medication deliveries in North America and serve 2.1 million customers every day in Europe alone. They also employ 78,000 employees across over 16 countries. Before approaching Snowflake, they came from 4 years of trying to lift and shift existing on-premise solutions to the cloud, having successfully migrated only a handful. They had multiple decentralized teams, each spending a lot of time managing exploding amounts of data independently. And they had the added challenge of the nature of their data being very sensitive and being subject to strict regulations. They then approached Snowflake and soon realized it could be a cornerstone in their cloud migration, allowing them to centralize their technology and data management solutions into a core team, while at the same time continuing to keep analytics closer to the business. By removing the on-prem constraints that were frustrating their analytics teams, their users could spend more time on actual analytics and analyzing data rather than on data plumbing and technology maintenance. In less than 3 months, they completed their migration from their legacy on-premises environment, observing 86% improved load speeds and up to 5 times faster complex query runtimes. All this with the added benefit of being able to manage that data securely in compliance with their industry's particularly strict regulation. Another customer I'd like to highlight is Capital One. It's another one of those companies that really don't need any introductions. Their goal was to deliver personalized, data-driven experiences to their consumers, and similarly to the Sainsbury's use case that you'll hear about later, they had issues in their old architecture with siloed data, so it was really hard to get all that data they needed to support their goals. On top of that, their architecture was riddled with issues on resilience, making it really hard to guarantee business continuity. Snowflake's built-in security and cross-region capabilities allow them to guarantee resilience and protection, and our platform's architecture provides them with the right amount of power to run complex queries on all types of data. If you think about the resilience gains alone, they're enough to justify an investment of this size just because of the trust that you can put in your data and the confidence that you can give your customers that their own data assets are protected. And finally, another phenomenal use case for us is Sainsbury's, another company that really needs no introduction, especially here in the UK. We have Graham from Sainsbury's joining us today on this session, so he'll be able to tell us all about his own journey, their own journey, and I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but in short, Sainsbury's, from our perspective, very much like Capital One, had issues with extremely siloed data and with queries being prohibitively slow, which they managed to solve by making Snowflake a core component of their cloud-first strategy. So without any further ado, I will leave the virtual stage to Graham so that we can hear about his first-hand experience delivering and managing Snowflake at Sainsbury's. I would like to thank you for joining today, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have in the Q&A.
Thank you, Luca. My name is Graham Forbes. I'm a principal data engineer in Sainsbury's. And when I joined Sainsbury's, we were several different companies with several different data strategies. It was decided that we'd try and merge all of the different offerings we had into one multi-channel, multi-brand business and move from a place where data was localized, siloed, and highly likely to be duplicated to a place where all the data is democratized and available to all analysts. This was part of the formation of Sainsbury's Tech, which put all of our IT capability under one head, Phil Jordan. Sainsbury's is a multi-channel, multi-brand business. It consists of Sainsbury's, Groceries Online, Argos, 2 Clothing, Habitat, Nectar, and Nectar 360, as well as Sainsbury's Bank. And that's a very different set of industries and capabilities that we bring to the marketplace. I joined Sainsbury's around 3 years ago to build the capabilities for the new Nectar launch, mainly infrastructure, application, and the key part was a data science engine to support the automated decisioning. One of the earliest challenges was finding all of the data required to support the data science components, and then getting access to it. It was further complicated by the fact the data we required was coming under a new piece of legislation, GDPR. Data is both a blessing and a curse. It allows you to innovate, adapt and plan, but it also carries risk as the most valuable data is, quite rightly, strictly regulated. We need to support 1,000 or so analysts and their data requirements, but also our integration partners too, those who we share data with to allow us to provide the best experience we can for our customers. We now have a multi-channel, multi-brand strategy and a cloud-first strategy, and our data strategy needs to enable that. So when we look for a strategic partner, we noticed that Snowflake separated storage, compute, scaled well, but also separated out the network routes, which doesn't sound like much until you realize you have multiple businesses within a business, all of which have different security requirements. Being able to split out the way you get your data, as well as where you store it and how you access it, means you've got immediately 3 different levers you can pull on to get the best optimal solution for each type of challenge. So we took a pragmatic approach around our risks. Because the simple facts are, if data is too accessible, we violate GDPR and we lose our business. If data is too inaccessible, we lose our analysts and we can't innovate, and then we potentially lose our business. So we want to know our customers better than anyone else. We really want to understand the cost of our decisions, and we want to remove any practical barriers we can to innovation and curiosity. These are the key drivers for our data strategy. So to enable us to use data effectively, we have to define our business in terms of data and function, rather than this organizational chart. What a business does at a fundamental level is the most durable element. We still sell products, we still have customers, so we make sales. So we made a pragmatic decision to split off the way we look at data from the business structure, which allows us to assign a data owner to every single bit of data in Sainsbury's. And every bit of data has to be classified, especially if you want to meet legislation. So it doesn't matter whether a system is from the 1980s, like an old mainframe, or something that's just been freshly built. There is one owner of the data that's produced, and that one owner defines whether the master of historical record, or the current record, or both. So once you have an owner and a model, you now have a map to who to go to get access to a particular piece of data. So for economies of scale, we decided that the master of historical record should probably be a data warehouse that is highly scalable and supports all our business use cases. This is where Snowflake comes in. Now, to make all these use cases happen, there has to be a way of highlighting the business, not only where the data comes from, but where it's going to and how long it's going to take. But the most important thing is how valuable is a piece of data, especially when you combine it with another piece. This means that every single data is actually a product, which means it requires a product owner. So we now have a product owner for customer data, one for sales data, one for logistics, store operations, etc., etc. And that product owner defines how that is used, how valuable it is, which in turn determines how quickly a business use case with that data gets dealt with. So their sole responsibility is to prove what and why we are doing something with data. And the engineering teams they work with determine how and when we deliver that product. Those teams have been empowered to self-organize and structure themselves along the lines of their deliverable so they can adapt to their team to deliver the product. They have access to a group of subject matter experts for all of the things that exist outside the day-to-day. So for example, compliance and governance, or service operations if you want to make sure that that team can support something 24/7. So let's have a quick look at some use cases. We had the core of the Nectar 360 business, which was in a data center. We wanted to turn that data center off. So there are 3 approaches. We can either move the physical hardware, or we can migrate the whole thing as is, or we can remodel it along our information reference model lines and move the data that way and actually do a migration that unlocks the value of that data, which is what we decided to do in this case. It took a few months, but in the end, it integrated seamlessly. We have the core of our business, a data warehouse, which a lot of our financial decisioning is made of. That deemed too risky to remodel, so instead we did a migration. As I said, pragmatic. We have the new Nectar program, which allows you to make real-time decisioning around what offers you would like to make to a customer, which is powered by a transaction stream, which exists in real time. That also goes into Snowflake and allows us to power other innovative ideas off the back of it. So in summary, we need to assess the data that we have. We have to align that data to our model. That means it is intrinsically owned. And then we have to empower the owner to deliver the value from that data. And to do that, we need to provide an operating model which allows us to iterate quickly and safely and support that empowerment. And the main thing is that we can then focus on delivering the highest value data for our company. Thank you. I would like to hand you over to Natalie and Andy.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks. And thanks, Luca and Peter as well. Great presentations. I want to kick off with some questions, and I might start with my own actually. So, Graham, you were talking about democratizing your data, driving that sense of innovation, but how do you balance that with making sure that all of your teams are still facing in the same direction, still driving towards the same outcomes?
Great question. But we have 20 teams that are all actually going in different directions, driving different business outcomes. So actually every team is empowered individually to drive towards the business outcomes that they are set. So overall, we've aligned the business to a data model so that everyone talks the same language, but not everyone has the same outcomes. We have some people, for example, who are trying to do real-time data processing to support New Nectar, while other people are driving forward financial futures program. And both of those have completely different outcomes, completely different stakeholders, but do have to collaborate to get this data that is common to both of those use cases. So in the short answer is we check their business model and check that they're still going to give us a return on investment and that the proposition still holds, and they're still aligning to the data and still doing it according to our government's guidelines. But in essence, they're empowered to deliver business value themselves. Peter, do you have any experience from other clients doing similar things?
Yeah, well, I think what's really interesting about your response, Graham, is it gives the power to those teams. But at the same time, the really key bit is there's still an element of governance in there. You know, there are still principles behind this, that there is a single source of a particular type of data rather than 3 or 4 competing sources of that same data. So that's the way that you tend to avoid the anarchy of everybody going off doing their own thing. The data is controlled, but everybody can use it in their own way to come out with whatever business outcome they're charged with. And I think that's common across organizations.
Yeah, I think it's a balance of process and technology. You need to have the right processes in place so that people feel empowered to drive their own goals, to drive their own business units the way they want towards their own goals. But at the end of the day, you need to have that centralized layer of data that is shared across different teams and with the right governance on top, so that you know that people are feeding from the same accurate data sources. And if you think about a data platform powering all different types of workloads, that's where you can empower your teams to really have one centralized source of data for all that.
I won't say it's easy, by the way. They are, because they're empowered, they also do, there's a lot of back and forth between them about prioritization, and that's where our main challenge lies. But it is a bit like riding a tiger, if I'm honest. But it does seem to be driving that sense of innovation.
Thank you for the answer to that one. We're getting a number of questions coming in around the approach, it being related to technology, business outcomes. So I think for me, how do we stop this from being seen as a technology transformation for technology's sake, i.e. the shiny new toy in the corner? And how do you make sure it's still aligned to business value and business outcomes?
Another great question. There's nothing else in the marketplace that does what Snowflake does currently. We are constantly reassessing to find out if there is someone who can work at the same scale, that is cloud first in everything they do, that allows us to separate out the storage from the compute, from the way you access it. When I was said in the talk, we are 4 different companies. We have 4 copies of everything. We're trying to concentrate it in one place. So right now, what we're trying to do is reduce 4 to 1. And then once we're down to 1, making sure that that 1 is the master of record that we're going to use for all of our decision making. The other thing we do is we assess every time we find a new data source or an old data source, whether or not it does contribute towards that business outcome. So again, it comes down to that empowerment. If it isn't the right tool for a team, they will come and tell us, and then we'll reassess. And we reassess all of our technology choices every few months. So the way we really stop it is we look at the business value it's returning. If it's no longer retaining that business value, we reassess and we pivot. Luca, have you had any other clients?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually part of my job description in a way, to go and find those valuable use cases with our customers, with our prospects, where we know that the adoption of technology is going to be driven by necessity and not by the desire of some IT team to just, have the shiny new toy. So if you think back of my presentation that I did a minute ago, it's all about finding workloads, finding use cases, finding different types of things that people want to do that currently are not supported by technology. So what we like to do is talk to data scientists, to talk to BI analysts that are limited by concurrency issues, that are limited by capacity issues, that don't have access to all of the data, that don't have access to the facility to manipulate data and integrate it in their own processes when it's maybe semi-structured. All the things that the platform does, we like to talk to people about them, right? So from our perspective, a good opportunity to have an happy customer comes from a limitation of a current technology, rather than just saying, hey, here's the new thing, I've heard about it at a conference, and let's try to implement it for no reason.
Peter, have you got any similar stories?
Well, yeah, I think I'd add, to be honest, I'll criticize the question slightly in that I think it's rooted in very old world thinking. And the idea that people would be able to these days get sign off for technology's sake. I think most of us would recognize that's not been possible for a very long time, and particularly not in the current environment. But also it sort of relies on the fact that you're thinking about this as one monolithic project. And I think the answers that both Graham and Luca have talked about really highlight that these days it's much more about incremental build. These things will scale. And actually, you pick one use case, then the next, and gradually it builds over time. But you have to make the fundamental argument to begin with that this is the strategy, this is the approach to go with in the first place. I think most of my client organizations have already won that argument. So really, it's about that incremental thinking and build each case as you come and incrementally add to the platform rather than it being a monolithic investment.
Thanks all, great insights there. Time for one final question. Let's have a look. Okay, technical one here, and it's a classic. So you're investing in a data lake. How do you stop that lake becoming a swamp? What are your lessons learned?
The easy answer to that is that we've had 3 lessons before where we built swamps. So from that, we've learned that every single bit of data that we land has to have a purpose. So we only land data if there's a business case for it now. We make sure that that data is classified, so at least once a piece of data is landed, other people can benefit from it. But the first question we ask ourselves now is not get all the things from all of the places, it's get the data when you need it. Because if no one's asking for it, you probably don't need it right now. We have 2,000, 3,000 databases lying around. We would go mad if we tried to land all of those at the same time, and it really would become a swamp. It would be a full-time task just landing the data, and then no one can use it. So our main lessons learned are only land for it.
I think Graham nailed it. If you think of the whole concept of a lake and a lake becoming a swamp, it's all rooted in technology and limitations. So at a certain point in time, people started realizing that the volume of data was growing at a pace where their data warehousing technologies could not cope with it, right? So they started putting stuff in lakes with the idea that one day, this is data, everybody's saying it's valuable, one day we'll get some value out of it. For now, let's park it in there. that's just not the right approach, and it's not needed at the moment. You just now have the ability to put data in platforms that can hold all that data at the same time, while at the same time getting value out of it immediately. You can empower your SQL analysts to take whatever type of data and use it immediately. So yeah, it's the whole idea that's a bit antiquated.
I have to agree with that, Luca. I mean, there's a number of clients that I see where, if I'm honest, they're not really clear what the purpose of their data lake is. And why have they got it? What is the purpose of it? When do they put data in? When do they not put data in? And actually, without that really clear, agreed view across the business of what is the data lake and what is the purpose of it, it becomes really hard to enact some of those disciplines that both you and Graham talk about. So hopefully most people have got through that first stage, but if they haven't, then be really clear on the purpose of your data lake. And then, as Graham said, be very critical about bringing in what you need to bring in rather than just treating it as a dumping ground.
One thing we did get very early on was we are multiple businesses. We have multiple stakeholders, most of them fairly senior. What we did is we sat them all in a room and said, what data do you need? Can you please, every time you spin up a new data source, tell us? And then at that stage, we'll make a decision of whether you're going to be the master of historical record or we are. So we're not pushing everyone into the data lake. We're pushing people in where it's practical as well, which is another little nuance that we used not to do. It used to be mandated you had to. Now it's if it makes business sense.
Thank you, Graham, Luca, and Peter for your insights today. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for in this episode, but please join us tomorrow when ThoughtSpot and Just Eat will be talking about how they're putting insights into the hands of the restaurateurs.
Look forward to seeing you at 10 a.m. tomorrow. It's our final day of our Experience Analytics virtual week. Until then, I've been Natalie Williams.
And I've been Andy Gould. See you tomorrow.